Welcome viewers to another Fireside chat of Jumpboard Consulting. Jumpboard Consulting, in its pursuit to enable veterans for seamless transitioning into corporate world, conducts a series of Fireside chat with veterans to understand their transition journey into corporate careers as also entrepreneurship. This enables veterans to understand the possible do's and don'ts to chalk out a customized transition journey for themselves. We also interact with HR and business leaders who have hired and managed veterans to gain insights as also to understand about veteran employability in their respective industries. Jumpboard Consulting has been launched on 27th of May. Until now, we have successfully conducted one webinar, 3 fireside chat, and 22 individual focus sessions. We're also launching our battle readiness program for transitioning veterans from 4th of July and will span across 4 weeks. Coming to the man of the moment, Vikram Mohan. So Vikram Mohan is a former major from Armoured Corps of the Indian Army and has served in the desert sector and Counter Insurgency areas of J&K. After pursuing an MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur, he has worked across 4 countries in the domain of digital strategy consulting with a focus on life sciences and healthcare sector. Currently based in Dublin, Ireland, he is an avid marathoner and a fitness ambassador. Thanks, Vikram. Thanks for your time. So coming to the questions, tell us about your journey in defense and move to the corporate world.
Thanks, Abhishek, and honored and the pleasure to be on your show. So thanks for inviting me over. It's always wonderful to get together with the other veterans who are planning to make a switch into the corporate world. And to your question about my journey, well, let me try and kind of put it in context to the topic also as I talk about my journey and the focus of your talk shows. So my journey was like a regular Army officer's journey who joined the National Defense Academy straight out of school. And if I look back in retrospect, those 3 years that I spent in the National Defense Academy were like a crash course in character education, the way I would spell it. Got a chance to, as you see on the screen, play polo and ride horses across the country, played in multiple polo seasons and equestrian championships. Fortunate to have been part of a team wherein the guys I played with currently are probably Arjuna awardees, the likes of Ravi Rathore and Ashish Samantre, leading their own polo teams of their respective corps. So if you actually look back and I try and put this in context, the experiences which one had the opportunity to gain in those 3 or 4 years of the National Defense Academy and the Indian Military Academy, while you were doing stuff like riding, weapon training, adventure camps, cross-country, etc., the experiences which you gather over there were wonderful, and that really takes you to a different level. That was where I started my journey in uniform. And now if I was to put that in context, and I imagine somebody in my age group at that point in time sitting in an engineering college or a medical college, looking at maybe engineering drawing or statistical modeling, would they be getting that kind of an exposure to be doing those things at what a typical middle class family can afford in terms of a college to put their kids in? So that's just putting in context the kind of experiences which the men in uniform bring along. And not to say that it was just sports and adventure, it was also studies. And the testimony to that is that the guys who I studied with in ND and IMA are today sitting in the classrooms of the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. And I'm talking about a couple of course mates who, like the likes of Mridul Sarma and Ayushman Padi, who are currently in ISP after doing a wonderful time in the Army Aviation Corps and flying helicopters all around. So just to say that that's the kind of balanced education that one had the opportunity to get in those 3 or 4 years of basic training, as you would call it. Finished with that and then joined the Armored Corps, which is like the tank corps in the Indian Army. Was fortunate to be commissioned into Skinner's Horse, one of the oldest regiments of the Indian Army. And again, if I try to put this in context, if you imagine a life of a 22, 23-year-old young man or a woman who's working in the corporate world, at that point in life, you would probably be a business analyst feeding in some data sheets for a partner who's going to be making a presentation the next day to the clients. And here I was in charge of an equipment which was worth almost $5 million, firing armor-piercing rounds from the barrel of a 125 smoothbore T-72 tank, which weighed 45 tons. And that's, again, an experience which you can't, compare with anything in life. And that's something which probably would resonate with a lot of officers who've probably had the same life. And yeah, so that was there. And then, as you would imagine, the Army career is not just one straight focused path, and you get to do a lot of different things. I had the opportunity to lead my regiment in ceremonial parades, led the standard. And also, the interesting bit is that it gives you a chance to demonstrate your skills in different avenues. And I was fortunate to have also moved in the Rashtriya Rifles and got a chance to actually be a part of the Counter Insurgency operations in Jammu and Kashmir, leading my troops over there. And again, if I was to put this in context, Abhishek, you would relate to this in business school when they teach you about game theory and you apply that in business. Well, in this kind of a life, you actually do that on ground, because what you're trying to do over there is read the mind of the militant, and the gray zone of complexity which you come across is much more ambiguous and volatile than any game theory constraint that you would need to apply in the corporate life. And Abhishek, you would probably be much more aware about this, and being an infantry officer, have much more experience than what I have in this domain. But just what I want to call out is this kind of life, which any other Army officer would have probably led, holds him in very good stead to combat anything that comes to him ahead if he was to make a switch to the corporate world. So there I was, leading my dream, living my dream of driving tanks and being in combat in a war zone. But life is not about all smooth sailing, and the winds change. And what happened was that the winds changed. The wind changed from a tailwind to a headwind. And I happened to meet with an injury in an active operation against militants in Jammu and Kashmir, which really changed my world, and I was hospitalized. Now, when the wind blows, there are two things you can do. One is you can build a wall and you can sit inside it, or you can build a windmill and channel that energy for your future. And as they say, life is not about the card of hands which you get, but it's about the deck you deal, right? And what I decided to do at that point in time was not restrict myself to being in a kind of an environment wherein you would not be able to do what you wanted to do, while given the organization, it would have still allowed me to move ahead. My promotions would have been in place, but I was not attuned to the idea of armchair officering, and I decided to pursue something else. So I gave my entrance examinations and I qualified for a business school, got myself back into shape, lived my life outside, did marathons all over the world, was also chosen to be a brand ambassador. So just to say that, life and the art of living is about getting up after you get knocked down. And that is what I think is the important essence. And subsequently post that, when I joined the corporate world, moved around multiple countries, worked in companies ranging from startups to multinational corporations, got a chance to work with a few of the smartest men and women that I've ever had across industries such as telecom, life sciences, retail, FMCG, etc. And yeah, that's been the journey so far. So just to put that in context, the experiences which one had in the initial years of being trained at the National Defense Academy and the Indian Military Academy, that helped really to imbibe those qualities which then can put you in good stead for any kind of a challenge going ahead. And as I said, life is, the art of living is about getting up after you've been knocked down by life. And that's what I would probably like to share as something that I learned from the experiences that life gave me.
Thanks. Thanks, Vikram. Very, very inspiring feat. How you have turned around the adverse situations rather than lying low with your circumstances which life has given you. You have actually challenged the life and made a completely different path for yourself. And I must say, you are inspiring a lot of veterans. You are inspiring a lot of veterans who are planning to transition, and the entire journey which you have gone through, and you are into a field which is very less traveled by veterans. So I must congratulate you, Vikram, for your journey. Moving to the next question, what would be your suggestions to veteran transitioning from defense?
So thanks for those kind words. Now, this is just my perspective, and I think everybody's got a different perspective. In my mind, I think transition may be a little too strong a word to use, and I'll explain the reason why I say that. End of the day, what you're in is an industry. It's called the government industry. It's acknowledged as an industry when you talk about multinational corporations. Defense, aerospace is an industry, and government is the sector in which it is typically clubbed in. So you are in an industry. It's not that you are transitioning from something else. You're actually moving industries is the way I see it. Let's go deeper into it. Let's see about the skills you already have, right? As a veteran, you have the skills which are required for you to function in any role that could be potentially offered to you outside. Let's go deeper into it and say, why do I say that, right? When you're as a veteran, you are doing all those things which give you those basic skills. And if you look at it, when you're preparing a statement of case, you're actually preparing like a statement of work, right? It's a proposal you're preparing. When you're preparing a noting sheet, that's a proactive pitch you're making to a client. When you're looking at your works contracts, when you're looking at your engineering, logistic contracts, those are like business contracts. When you're looking at your account statement for your unit, that is the income statement and the cash flow statement that you would probably come across in a corporation, right? So net, you have been doing those things. So why are you looking at it from a lens that I'm transitioning on an ocean, I'm crossing a frontier, I'm moving borders? It's not like that. It's just, you've done those things, you have the skills, you move into a new industry. Of course, what is required is that you need to get upscale in that, what is current, right? That's one, that's what I call, and that's what I would kind of summarize is that it's not a transition, it's industry switch. Point number two is risk. A lot of people see that it's a risk, right? Well, my response to that is the greatest risk is not taking any risk. We are in a world where the safest option is actually the most dangerous option, right? We are actually in a world where playing it safe is the most dangerous option. So life is all about taking risks. When you say goodbye, life will give you a new hello. So don't get too caught up about the fact that it's a big risk. Life is a show to the greatest. Life is a ticket to the greatest show on earth, is a saying, right? And what you've had a chance is to watch that show in a single screen theater. Not many people get a chance to go into a multiplex theater and watch the same show on different screens. When you're getting that chance, go jump for it. So that's what I would call about risk. And of course, related to this is also the fact that you got to de-risk, right? So how do you de-risk now? Point number one is you got to make your skills relevant. There's a word called elasticity of skills. You have those skills which are fundamental in nature. Now, how do you combine them? How do you club them together? And that is what is key, right? And how do you make sure that you are upskilling yourself and demonstrating the evidence of that skill? It's not just okay to do a certification. You can do 10 certifications, you can do 10 courses, but that won't really meet the rubber on the road, because what they would look at when they view you as a candidate is going to be how you applied those skills. So look for those evidences. And there's nothing stopping you from doing that, right? You do pro bono consulting. You look at opportunities. It's a remote world. It's a virtual world. There are websites like elance, freelancer.com. Become a freelancer. Build up your portfolio. Demonstrate that you've done that. You've actually implemented that skill on ground and you've been able to move the needle. You've created impact. And that's a story which will resonate very well with any recruiter. When I know that Captain XYZ has qualified, has demonstrated the skill, and actually this is the evidence. That's the story you need to weave for yourself, right? That's really important in terms of making sure that you have those skills by which you can actually demonstrate. The other thing I'll talk about is the fact that you need to start mixing with people who are beyond your own world. They say that you are a combination of the 5 people that you spend the maximum time with, right? So expand your horizon, pick up the phone, talk to 20 people, talk to somebody who's living abroad, talk to somebody who's in a different industry. And that's how you will learn about what's happening, and you will be able to adapt very quickly. The other thing I would say is that you don't really need to be the smartest person in the room in any situation in life. You've got to be the best sponge, as I say it. What does the sponge do? It learns from the others, it absorbs, right? So you've got to be absorbing, you've got to be incorporating. And it's another way of de-risking that entire opportunity is to have that confidence and have the capability and the skill set within you. And I'll refer to my good friend, who's a para-commando and a McKinsey consultant, Deepak Iyer, in his own words, and he says, whether you're a racehorse or you're a worn-out mule, whether you consider yourself a race-worthy stallion or a worn-out mule, either ways you'll end up proving yourself right. So you think of yourself as a race-worthy stallion and you will be one. If you think yourself as a worn-out mule, so you will be one. So don't think of yourself that I'm transitioning, I'm crossing a frontier and I don't have the skills. You have everything which it takes to do what the job requires. It's just about making sure your skills are relevant. You've been able to provide the evidence of those skills and you de-risk that entire situation. And lastly, also make sure that your finances are in place, right? So get educated about making sure that you understand how the market works, understand how the asset classes work. And as Sun Tzu said, what is the greatest thing is best done when it is still small. So start making those small changes much earlier in life, and that will help you in good stead going later on. Those would be a few things that I would probably call out as, to your word about transitioning veterans, but in my mind, veterans who want to change industries.
Here speaks a consultant. Thanks, Vikram. I think very craftfully, skillfully, he has explained to veterans what capabilities we already have and how we need to enable ourselves through, and as he's rightly said, through smaller pieces, you are able to start building yourself from as early as possible, because it's a transition. It's not a transition into a completely different career. You are going to prove yourself a leader which you have been groomed like in maybe a different industry, in a different format. But yes, thanks, Vikram. Very beautifully worded. Moving to the next question. What are some things that veterans should unlearn when moving to the civil street?
That's an interesting question. You probably won't hear of it when you're switching industries, but I think it applies in this case. So to your question, I would probably list 3 or 4. The first one being the speed at which we operate. And it's just a function of the way the organization is structured. It is the government sector, it moves slow. That's how it is, right? And it doesn't apply only to the defense, it applies to the Ministry of External Affairs, to the Indian Police Service, to even the Department of Defense in the US. That's the nature of the beast. But would that help you when you move to the corporate world? The answer is no. And let me kind of illustrate it with an example. And it's a story. I'm sure you've read Alice in Wonderland, right? And there was a sequel to Alice in Wonderland. It was, again, written by Lewis Carroll, Through the Looking Glass. And the character in that is, again, Alice, and she's talking to the Red Queen. And the Red Queen and Alice have been running for a long time, but Alice feels that she's still at the same place, despite running so much. So the Red Queen says, my dear, hey, we must run as fast as we can just to stay in place. And if you wish to go anywhere in life, you must run twice as fast. So you need to be running fast, right? You need to be adapting fast. And a data point to support that is that a new technology today hits 50 million users in 18 days. That's the pace, and it's going down right now. So just get that into your mind that you got to be moving fast. You got to be running as fast as you can. And you got to be upskilling yourself. You got to be aware of the environment. You got to be aware of what the consumer mindset is, what the technological shifts are happening. And that is something which I think is a key effort, because you are kind of ingrained in an environment where things are going to happen as they are ordained to be. You'll reach the next rank in 6 years, and then you'll reach the next rank in 8 years, and there'll be a promotion board after 20 years. So that's how you are ingrained to be. And the environment will not change, because there'll be a policy which will be required to be reviewed by 10 people, and then there'll be a change. But that's not how things would work. So that's point one. Second is, again, like if I was to give an analogy of a fairy tale, you would have heard of the fairy tale of Rapunzel, with the lady with the long locks, and she was in a stone tower up above and trapped over there. And that syndrome is called the Rapunzel in Stone Tower syndrome. So what do you mean by that? It is that I'm sitting in a stone tower and I'm seeing the world like this. And I don't need to come down from the stone tower and get my hands dirty, right? I'm a brigadier, I'm an air commodore. I don't need to know how a tank functions, or I don't need to get into the hangar and start playing around with the dashboard and the cockpit of the aircraft. Well, things are different, right? You got to get your hands dirty. You got to get into the process. You got to get into the steps. You got to break through the value chain. You got to look at the technology, look at the interface, understand how it all comes together. You got to understand what are the different instruments in the orchestra and know how to then play it together. So that's the second change which I would suggest is get out from the stone tower, start getting your hands dirty, take the pen and run to the fire. If there is a fire, run to it and do it yourself. That's again a shift. And that's something which you need to unlearn, because a lot of us, when you're in the uniform, you have like a ton of people under you, and you don't have to get your hands dirty. You have a clerk who's typing your letter, getting it to you for your signature, but that's not the way it's going to work here. So that's number two. The third thing I would say is, the kind of emphasis that we draw on seniority, on experience, on age. And that doesn't apply. So you got to unlearn that. Now, if you've been in a particular field and there is something which has come up, which is very recent in the world, and which is the hottest skill, if there is a 20-year-old who's able to acquire that skill, he will be above you and he will decide what is to be done in the project, right? Now, if a 60-year-old man is able to acquire that skill and master it, he will be the one who will be running the show. So it doesn't matter. Get that preoccupation of age, seniority, and experience away from your mind. And that is key, because then you're working with an open mind. You're working for what is required to be done on the job. And you don't have that restraint or the constraint and reservation of working under somebody who might be very junior to you, who might be junior in age, in experience, etc. It is again something requires to be, I would say, unlearned, right? And the last thing which I would call out is, now in the defense forces, you're put into different situations. You might be, working in a peacetime location, doing some civil works, and then the second day you would be in the desert sector, maybe laying some mines, and in the third day you would be probably in this another tenure, you would probably be in a Counter Insurgency environment, right? So you are exposed to a lot of things, and you think everything is possible outside, and everything I can do. But again, drawing a corollary over here, there's something called the rule of three. And there's a reason why even in the armed forces, you have 3 companies leading up to a battalion, and 3 battalions leading up to a brigade, and 3 divisions leading up to a corps. And that rule of 3 says that in this world of infinite possibilities, you got to boil them out and focus on 3 courses of action. So when you're making your plans, that what you want to do when you move out of your current job in the defense, have just 3 courses of actions. and work against those options. Don't start boiling the ocean and try everything. So have those 3 courses of action and stick to them. That I would probably say is the single most important thing. And this is not just me saying, it's documented. And the Marines in the US follow that because they feel that if they have more than 3 courses of action, that is probably going to be reducing the chances of success in an operation. They have 3 plans, and that is what they stick to. So when you are making that industry switch, have 3 courses of action and stick to them.
Thanks, Vikram. I must say, very relatable fairy tale stories. I'm sure you have grown up looking at a lot of fairy tales. Thanks. Wonderful anecdotes. I will like to speak a bit about the last part which Vikram has spoken. Our professor, Salar Mukherjee in IIM Ahmedabad, he used to teach strategy in a very simple way. He used to say that strategy is all about closing doors. Means he asked one day in a question, what is strategy? And we were leaders from different industries, IT, marketing, army, air force, and we gave different examples. In the end, he said strategy is all about closing doors and boiling down to the final maybe 2 or 3 options which you're going to take, and maybe finally steer to the only options which will help you to achieve your objective. And in our army veteran experiences, one thing which has been ingrained into us to find that objective which we want to achieve. And for that objective, whether it's to be successful in corporate world, in a particular industry, for a financial benefit, identify that objective and then start looking at the options which can take it to you. Thanks, Vikram. Thank you very much. I think very informative points. Thank you. Coming to the next question. What would be your larger message to the civilian world when it comes to veterans?
Yeah, I think that's a very pertinent question. And when we say the larger world, I think we got to put that in context again, right? If you're talking about the world over here, the world includes other countries. And if you look at that, if you look at it from that lens, and let's take an example of the United States, right? So Abhishek, you and I are both veterans, but are we the same in the eyes of the government of the United States if we were to be serving in the United States Army? Will we or not?
No.
Yeah. And I think you probably know the reason, but a lot of other veterans might not know the reason. They have different categories of veterans, right? And I'll give the example of, let's take Abhishek's example here. Now, you are a gallantry award winner from the Indian Army, right? So you don't come in the category of a general veteran. You come in the category of an armed forces service medal veteran, right? And that's the respect which the civilian world gives to the veteran. So by the sheer act of valor which you displayed on the battlefield and you were awarded a Sena medal, that gives you a different stature, which is that of an armed forces service medal veteran, right? In my case, I would probably be called an active duty or a campaign medal veteran because I was a battle casualty in an active operation in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, there could be a third person who left recently within the past 3 or 4 years. He would be called a recent veteran, right? So there are different categories of veteran by which the world views and respects the uniform which they've donned over the years. Now, that's the United States. Now, we broaden that to, let's say, we talk about the European geography, right? Now, in my experience, having worked in different countries, I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of veterans. And these come from countries such as Israel, Turkey, Russia, and all of them have kind of like a compulsory military service, right? For Israel, it's both the men and the women, and these men and women make fantastic colleagues in the corporate world. Russia, again, I've worked with colleagues from Russia, from Turkey, from South Korea, from Israel, and they've all put in like a few years in the defense forces, and then they moved into the corporate world, and they've done exceedingly well, right? So the point over here is that these organizations are as competent, as brilliant as the Indian Armed Forces, but the lens by which their nations view them is different. And that, I think, is the change which we need to bring in this country as well. Maybe the wheels of motion have been put in place, but if still you look at it, we're not all same. There are differences, and you got to respect those variations. You got to respect and you got to acknowledge the feats of valor, the sacrifices, and the challenges which they've seen. So that kind of ecosystem is something which I would probably call out as an ask of not only the corporate world, but also the way the industry and the organizations are structured within India. And also how that entire ecosystem can be improved by this method of classification. So yeah, that I think would be my message to your question.
Thanks. Thanks, Vikram. I think there's a message from Santosh. He says attitude, aptitude, and confidence. Corporate has major crunch of people with these skills. Veterans, we need you badly. Message from someone who has spent 25 years in industry. Salute you all. Thanks, Santosh. Thanks a lot for your message. And I echo to Vikram's thought. I think there are few companies which have structured veteran hiring programs, but again, the number is very few. And we will need more structured interventions across industries to have veteran hiring, because this talent pool has all the skills to lead a team in a VUCA environment, which is the present day situation where you say one day we have COVID, one day we have lockdown, and the third day there's an adverse impact on the business. So I echo with what Vikram is saying, and thanks Santosh for the great words. Moving to the next question, Vikram, your particular field, why should veterans look at consulting as a career option?
Okay, I'll lay out the carpet with what are the pros and cons, and then I think it's up to the people to take a call on that. But before I answer that question, what I would also like to point out is that this is just a field, right? It's an industry which I'm part of. But when you move to the organizations, if you find something which fancies you, if you find something you're passionate about, get onto it. If you're asked to jump onto a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat I've got. You just jump on it. And that's the attitude which you should go with. Now, having said that, when you talk about consulting, the good side is that it's got a lot of exposure to different industries, because when you're working as a consultant, you will be exposed from retail to FMCG to telecom to the tire industry to probably the life sciences, pharmaceutical, healthcare industry, and you'll have that exposure to multiple industries because you'll be working with different clients from different organizations. So now what does that do? That helps you get a very steep learning curve, because you're building up best practices, you're building up frameworks, you're incorporating the learnings, and you're applying them in environments which are alien to where you are actually sitting in within your own organization. So that helps you move ahead very fast in terms of your learning, in terms of adaptation, and in terms of what you can get from being exposed to different client environments. Number two, you are at the front line of an organization because you're facing a client, right? You're not facing an internal stakeholder. So if you were to draw a comparison, you are actually in the infantry and the armored corps, and you're actually right up front. You're not to say that the people who are at the rear of the value chain are not contributing as much as what these guys are doing, but these are the guys who are facing the client. So you're at the front line, and it puts you in a situation you got to think on your feet. You got to respond very quickly, and you got to make sure that whatever is done in the best possible output, because at the end of the day, you're putting your reputation of the organization at stake. That's two. Third is that you're going to be flipping hats very soon. You're going to be flipping hats every day. So one day you'll be probably making a pitch to a client or responding to an RFP, making a proposal, getting some more business in for the organization. The second day, you're actually going to be implementing that project. You're going to be on the ground delivering it, right? You're going to be making sure that the outcomes are as per what the client's strategic business objectives were. On the third day, you'll be doing some thought leadership activity, maybe giving a talk, writing a paper, or engaging with your colleagues in a workshop. And on the fourth day, you could be building some solutions. You could be building an accelerator. You could be defining a new process. You would be creating a workshop model. So you will be putting on multiple hats. And that again points back to the fact that you would be in a position where it will help you to acquire the skills, acquire the learning, and have a very steep curve in terms of your self-improvement. Now, related to that is also if you're, let's say, in an organization which does consulting at a multinational level, you will be flying. So it'll be a lot of traveling. You'll be moving countries. You'll be traveling 4 or 5 days a week, coming home on the weekends, living the good life, staying in good hotels. That again is part of the job. 5 days you'll be at deadlines, but on the weekend you'll be relaxing in a nice, glamorous place after the client engagement has got over. So that is really the life. To your question about consulting now. On the other side, it is also stressful because you'll be away from family. You would be required to produce results in very short timelines, and you will have to adapt to the client's environment. So it's stressful. It's going to be deadlines. It's going to be a lot of travel. It's going to be taxing, and it's going to take a lot of energy. But then the career track, which I've seen a lot of people in this industry adopt, is that you get those learnings, right? And then after that, you kind of specialize in one primary industry, and then you join that industry because then you're a subject matter expert and you got that background of looking at it from an external lens. And when you adapt that within the client organization, you're able to create much more significant value. So that's my 2 bits about consulting. But if I was to summarize, 2 things that. One, if you're offered a seat on a rocket ship, don't ask which seat, just get onto it, right? So don't think too much about the industry. If it's something which you're passionate about, go for it. And second is, you got to decouple success from happiness, right? You got to decouple that. Otherwise, you'll be running after success. So be happy in what you're doing. And as I said, life is a ticket to the greatest show on earth. If you got a ticket to see one show, which was the uniform one, if you're getting a ticket to see other shows, just go for it, because life at the end of the day is all about experiences.
So true, Vikram. I think great words coming from you. And consulting, I think one basic trait which we have in our defense career is something which we do on a day-to-day basis is problem solving across, as he said, one day in desert sector, one day in CI sector, the day in building cantonments. So sometime in structured environments and sometimes in unstructured environments. So this gives us a trait where we can do a bit of problem solving, but yes, the playing field will be different and we need to learn how to dribble the ball before we can hit the goal. Thanks, Vikram. So I think Vikram has had a great journey from, I must say, NDA to the place where he is in consulting. So we come to the end of the discussion. I will open the forum for questions from our audience.
And no question per se, but I just would like to make a mention that what Vikram has achieved is not a game of dice that you throw it and you get it. It's a serious hard work all along. And what he's done in services, possibly he's worked harder outside and then achieved it. So if I say I'm transiting outside and I'll get it without doing anything, I'm sorry. I'm dreaming a false dreams. So what I need to realize is that, yes, I have the capability, I have the confidence, and I have done it in the past in services. I can do it in future as well, anywhere. With that one rider, you need to start learning the ways of the world outside. Learn it, adapt it, make the change management process so smooth and going that you start loving what you want to do or whatever you adopt to do. And that's the way to grow. I must compliment Vikram for a wonderful talk is one part, but wonderful change that you made. I have another Armored Corps officer from an Armored Corps getting injured, going to AEC, and he is the highest Guinness books record of Guinness world records in writing. He's got the highest number of articles in the world written by any author. 5 books to his credit. And similar, anyone like you and me. So life is a wonderful roller coaster. It's up to us how we take it. Thank you, Vikram. It was wonderful listening to you, and I really loved it. All the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on the talk, Abhishek. Pleasure interacting with the team. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can say that today I am much more aware about the fairy tales, thanks to Vikram Mohan. But more importantly, it was a very informative session. A lot of inspiring stories, how he has changed the tide. And as Jeevan sir said, he has worked more hard in the corporate world to be where he is. So thanks, Vikram, for giving your time and sharing your valuable insights. I'm sure it will help veterans a lot better in their transition journey. So we come to the end of this session. We will be uploading this video on our YouTube channel, and do follow us on our LinkedIn page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks, Vikram. Thanks, the audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abhishek. Thank you. Pleasure having you.
Thanks everyone. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.